everyone. I'm Sarah Christensen from One Sage's View Astrology. Thank you for joining me today. I'm going to continue on our exploration of Astrology of Bridgerton, the series, and we're focusing on season 3 co-leads Nicola Coughlan and Luke Newton. In this video, I'm going to be exploring the London premiere and the events around the London premiere. So a lot of the focus will be on Luke's charts, and but I'll do also, some insights between the premiere event and then the release the following day, based on how much time we go through this. But I want to focus like that, so we have kind of chapter by chapter, because I think there's something I want to bring forward in this particular video about divine timing, because there were other points in the promo tour timing, other premieres, that there could have been a similar event, but this one was the event that it was brought forward, of kind of that disruption of the personal life stuff coming forward. But on whose choice, whose decision was that to make that? I don't think it would have been Luke himself, because of this is his career. And that would have been, pretty telltale that this is happening in a way that is coming from another person. But to me, from a perspective of astrology and as an evolutionary astrologer, I look at when a karmic wave breaks, meaning this is kind of like cracking open something for it to be acknowledged and healed at a deeper level per individual. Each person has their own role in it as a soul, and how they're connecting into it and being kind of in a soul contract together with another person. And it's not just we're observing, of course, as the general population, fans who are watching this thing, but it's also kind of those individuals who are very close to it. So Luke Newton himself, Antonia and her role in it. And I have not brought up her chart because I wanted to focus just on Luke and Nicola first. Nicola also has a kind of moment as being participating from, this is a career moment. This is a dear friend, and perceptions on the friendship and things like that. So it's actually touching into something that's important for her and her response, because in any situation that we have, that we're not the one making the decision, but we're the one responding to something that's brought forward to our attention. The key is, what is it bringing up, that how we may approach the response. And keep in mind, actors who are very, very visible, and especially this moment, there's a presentation of the self that's given to the public, and understanding Nicola's role in how she may respond as people understand this relationship between her and Luke as co-leads, and how that is perceived, but also the perception of the fantasy that has been created for the show. So she's very keen on that. So her response shows me both what I would expect out of someone with a Capricorn sun and a Mercury in Capricorn. What I want to get into is behind the scenes, there's also kind of what else is being stimulated for her, even though she did a fantastic job in her response on the follow-up of that. Okay, so we're going to dive in. I want to point out the most important thing is the timing. This is so important about timing, because there are factors that the co-leads were responding. Someone else made a decision for the event, but they're having to respond to it. However, there is soul contractual agreements on things, but it's also karmic moment, bringing stuff forward for each of them to sift through and understand themselves on a deeper level. Whether they will or when they will is a whole nother question, but the moment did present itself. So when the soul is in reflection in the future days and weeks, actually months and years, could be the case here, where there's that review of that and choices of who we invite into our close personal circle. Okay, I think these are all on the table for this. So we are going to get into it. I am enjoying this. I have certain things that keep showing up for me as I contemplate the astrology of these co-stars and what's going on with them at this moment, and what's going on with the show at this moment. It's very fascinating to me about the Eros and Psyche, but it's kind of, percolating other very interesting pieces of the astrology of the moment. I will bring forward a little bit more about the asteroid Juno in this because it does stand out in a couple of things. And so it kind of brought me to consider that. And also the nodes, the lunar nodes of the birth chart, which are so important. It's kind of it is foundational for evolutionary astrology to get an understanding of the nodes. Now, we're going on assumptions. We have the assumption that we have a very strong knowledge for Nicola's chart. So hers is actually more solid than Luke's chart. I want to keep that here. Luke's rising sign, we're going on the assumption, I'm 85 to 90% sure that he's a Leo rising with the moon in Cancer. He could be a Virgo rising with a Leo moon. There is still a chance that that's true, but I'm going on the assumption because of some things that show up in his personality, especially around food and his sensitivity and all of that, that puts that moon in the 12th house to me from a whole sign perspective, and some other kind of the emphasis that it has about that part of the self that's kind of in the 12th house, and where that brings attention to his nodal axis, north node in Sagittarius, and his 5th house of creativity and children and relaxation. But it's also the 5th house is the house for pleasure, and that is Venus, the house of Venus. And then the south node then would be in the 11th house, on the opposite side of the chart in Gemini, so that we have this Sag in the north node and Gemini for the south node. And so those two planets that are so important for Luke as it pertains to the lunar node axis is Jupiter is really important for the north node. He is here to understand perceptions and relationships, okay, and himself within the mix. South node tells me about where he's coming from, the past storylines that are karmically ready to kind of get registered by the soul and evolve something. Okay, so his south node in Gemini has a perspective that's important for us to keep in mind, that I have introduced in the other videos, but this is going to bring it even more forward because of the divine timing of the moment. Okay, so south node Gemini is very important. Mercury is paramount, so any planets in Gemini are highlighting his south node, highlighting the past, highlighting the dual nature, the duality. And when you have duality, it's kind of, to me, looking at the scenario of not making a choice, like being a pleaser to a degree that it's not living a whole truth, because it's not choosing a side. It's not kind of putting a stake in the ground to have, something grounded more in truth. Okay. That's part of this. Okay. I will bring in more of that. I just want to point that out. So hopefully that's not too long of an intro, but I want to kind of set some things up so you can understand as I dive in. Now, I may parse this out into, more than one video. So there could be that I have to split these apart because I can go for 2 hours on some of this stuff. So hopefully not, but hopefully it's interesting. I hope it teaches the point that I keep making, I think, in multiple videos about there's a divine timing of certain things and how they kind of have a perfect kind of combination of things to break open. And so we're going to get into it. So let's go. All right. So we're going to look at London premiere and the part 2 release. So the June 12th and 13th days in London for the Bridgerton series for season 3. And we're looking at co-leads for Luke Newton and Nicola Coughlan. So here for that event, we have the Nicola's chart first. I just want to point out a few things. Most of this will go into the depths of Luke's chart, but I want to point out Nicola's first because her chart is so foundational to kind of the pickup and the power of the power of the mirroring, the power of the combination. Her chart is so foundational to that because of her Psyche and Eros opposition and what she has in what's on her midheaven in terms of the Sagittarius energy and the Jupiter being so important for that explosion of things. Okay, so another thing that I have kind of brought forward in my exploration of this is the year that this is all happening. Nicola is the age of 37. And when you're 37, you're in the 2nd house annual perfection, because when you're 36, it's the 1st house. And when you're, so it kind of goes around like that. So Pisces, 2nd house. So that would be money, assets, possessions. I think I've covered this before, but I think it's more important that to kind of bring forward that it's Jupiter, the planet Jupiter is the most important planet the year that she's 37 from an annual perfections perspective. So 2nd house matters. So I'm going to stretch it into my evolutionary astrology in terms of her self-worth, her self-confidence. This is, she has a very strong sense of self. Otherwise, she couldn't be doing all the things that she's done so far, right? So let's point that out first. But we have this moment that's emerging with the red. This is the premiere for part 2 in London, which will have a spilling of other events within the hours. And here we have Saturn. Saturn is a very interesting planet. It has karmic timing attached to it because it's Saturn and timing. But Jupiter in that moment is down here in Gemini. And so all this Gemini is important to point out because we have Jupiter that had just recently entered that 5th house, her creative house. But this is also her house. This is also 5th house Venus for her pleasure, these kinds of things. She has Chiron, the wounded healer here. So there's something that she is learning in this lifetime about the duality of how she looks at her own pleasure. That's her 5th house of pleasure. That's her 5th house of children. But because she's it's so much in her creative, what she does creatively, that's kind of what's been magnified in her life is her creative and how that then works with her career, right? And friends that she makes and points of contact, and then the world stage that we see. I think that's important to point out that Jupiter is highlighting her 5th house, the moments of the London part 2 premiere. And that stellium, there's a stellium of 19 degrees is Mercury, which is the ruler of Gemini, with the sun in Gemini at 22. Venus is in Gemini at 24 and a vertex point at 26. Now, I have talked about Black Moon Lilith in other videos. Here it is very close to her Chiron. So there is this duality, and in the mix of, that woundedness, a part of the self, which is very much, it can be very subtle, but it is looking at her Mercury in some ways what's buried in the unconscious mind, because sometimes we don't get to these kinds of things until we start exploring astrology, until we kind of like have a moment to reflect on these certain things in our life. Chiron in that Gemini is speaking to the duality that is present in her creative self and how, parts of the self, but Black Moon Lilith is still pretty close. So there is a shadow piece of the feminine that is tucked in there that she will have to navigate. That's just telling me that at some point she's going to have to look at the parts of the self that have blocks around the pleasure principle. This whole Bridgerton romantic thing that she's created as an actress is one way to get at that, right? Like one way to explore these themes, talk about them and these kinds of things. So she'll be looking at that, right? So, and then that might get to something in her own unconscious mind. And I think when she's doing interviews, there might be something that sneaks out in the conversations. Now she's out of character. She's just talking about, what people might be asking her about, what she thinks about certain ways a relationship or how someone might be in relationship to a significant other that has a romantic partner. And we see that in the interviews for the red carpet premiere. So go explore those videos because I think a lot of things sneak out or come out, and it's not something that maybe they spent too much time, scripting. This is more kind of their thoughts on it because they've reflected on it, and that's important. Okay. So to me, it's bringing forth something to pay attention to, but I think it's getting ready to actually have a karmic moment because that Saturn is going to have a flood into the Jupiter in Pisces of her feelings about her self-worth and, how do I spread? She's got an interesting combination of planets that to me speak to why she could quickly respond the next day with, I think it was the next day, it could have been within 48 hours, but it was her response to, her supporting Luke, and he's the best person to have been her co-star and all the things that she loved about him, trying to remind fans that why, that piece. So Jupiter, so important. So Jupiter, by going into its transit into Gemini, is going to give her this review of the pleasure principle and the duality of it. So while Jupiter is in Gemini, and as it comes to her actual Chiron, she's getting this thing highlighted in her consciousness. Now she's a rising sign air. So this is something that she could actually get to and acknowledge and actually start working with it creatively, right? So she has done, while the Bridgerton thing was emerging for her season 3, she was also doing Big Mood. I think that's right. So she was doing so much in this time period in terms of creating, and they were all landing in the last, couple of months. And so it's important to kind of keep in mind that she is kind of dissecting this dual nature. So she is doing it creatively, and yet there's another very personal event. She only can respond to it. It's not something that she's making a choice on, right? So it's only that her response to it. So it kind of brings out more like, how are you going to respond to this that can feel like it's sabotaging something that you've created? It can feel like it's disrupting the thing that you've created and worked so hard for. So there is something that she has to work through herself that may emerge, can be very subtle. It could be so subtle, but it's still something that's in the consciousness. And this is such a heightened event with so many eyeballs on it, so many people passionate about it. And she cares about the fans immensely, and she cares about the work that she's done. She has high integrity into her work. And so this is, kind of giving her a chance to work on something at a higher level. That is so much energy that she has focused on her, and Luke has focused on him. But I think she has more experience in the soul to understand how to navigate it. So let me put that out. The moon being in Virgo here with the midheaven of the moment of the red carpet premiere also speaks to how the criticism is going to come out about the part 1, part 2. Even more people, voice people are going to voice their criticism of the show's time, or how the story went from their interpretation into the Bridgerton series from the books. I mean, there's people who love the books, and those who are in that circle with the books has that Virgo tonality to it. So Virgo is, the words, what was the words that would, from the books, that would end up in the show, right? That was super critiqued. So this is important to point out. Another thing I want to point out is we have the understanding of duality, and we also understand like the timing, the divine timing, but what it's focusing on. Saturn in Pisces in the moment on her Jupiter, it's still, it's so close, it's still kind of activating that. And that to me is like how someone tries to restrict their emotional feeling about something, but at the same time, there's still a difficult challenge to that, because Saturn in Pisces has a very difficult with the boundary of it. So that is square. That when you have a square, that's a challenge. That's a square to the Gemini and a square to all her Sag in her own 11th house. Okay, how that affects her sense of allies, something sneaking through, So there's that kind of like that disruption that comes in. Okay, that's Saturn disrupting, but there's an overflow of like feeling and how you restrict the feeling about what's going on in a particular moment. Okay, that's coming in just hours. And so when we look at the moment, but this is kind of like the moment of the red carpet. So all the eyes and all the adoration, people are, imagining them. So a lot of imagination, but in that moment of even the premiere, we can see that it's activating more. And with just a few steps of the moon, the transiting moon is the fastest thing, and of course the transiting the ascendant of a moment. So the ascendant moment of the red premiere starting at 5 p.m. London time, that's activating Scorpio. And so that's Mars. And so that can be brought into the picture as well. So I hope those pieces on that from Nicola's chart make sense. Let's see here. So Jupiter is so important. So we always look at the natal position of the planet. Where is it in the natal chart? So Jupiter is so important because annual perfection. This is a year that we have to pay attention. Where is Jupiter? What is it informing us about the timing of something? So this is the premiere. Jupiter is accentuating that there's something with allies. There's something with self-worth, self-confidence, money. I mean, her completing this is like definitely got rewards to it. You know what I mean? And then because she's in the position to complete this big contract for season 3, right? And then at the fifth house of creativity, we have Jupiter, but Jupiter's letting us know there's a dual nature. So the duality is not just like we had part 1 and part 2, where that was a choice that was made by Netflix, not by Shonda, not by any of those. It was made by Netflix, and so everyone else was having to respond to it. So there's this dual perspective of a part 1 and a part 2 split up like that. It hadn't been done before. So here we are with Jupiter and Gemini in that moment of the actual part 2 coming on from the premiere. Also, that it's hitting personal self-worth. We already know that. So now it's in Jupiter in transit's in the 5th. So it's activating 5th house themes of what she has in her own consciousness around duality. Okay. And it will highlight because of all this energy sitting on her Chiron and the Black Moon Lilith sitting there as well. So in the premiere, you don't necessarily get that right away. It's just that it's happening to the soul, and we're going to see it because something is definitely getting activated, right? Because Jupiter is important here. Now, another thing I want to point out is because the moon is so close and is applying towards the Juno there. To me, I want to pick up on Juno. And Juno in her chart is in the 12th house in Capricorn. So this is a Juno divine, kind of a divine, I shouldn't say divine. It's feminine energy. We look at it as Juno is like the wife, the spouse, the significant other. But I want to point something out. I went back and did kind of some refresh. I pulled my book from Demetra George called Asteroid Goddesses. I love Demetra George's work. She's one of my main teachers. But I went and got a deeper perspective on Juno in the 12th house. And I want to read this because I think it's so good. So Juno in the 12th house in your natal chart is significant in the karmic aspect of relationships. So just her Juno is telling me, oh, okay. So she's going to be experiencing something to bring forward about relationships in her life. Often the partnerships one magnetizes have a destined quality to them. There may seem to be no visible reason for the union, and yet here we are, we can see their connection from them being co-stars, okay? But underlying the surface is an emotional power that one cannot deny. The visible relationship is only the tip of an iceberg whose antecedent causes go back into past lifetimes. Yet, it is these unconscious aspects that surface and dominate the relationship interplay. Sometimes the partner may be disabled or ill, so that one needs to selflessly serve and make amends to them. In other cases, the partner may be a victim, and one must learn to release them and let them evolve on their own. Juno in the 12th house, individuals may experience loss, denial, or death of their partner. On a spiritual level, partnership is connected to a desire to merge with the infinite, where mysticism, dreams, ideals, and yearnings are shared. This placement can signify an ecstatic union. Okay, so not all the components like about, rush forward for me about Nicola, because we don't have a close relationship with her to kind of get into the unconscious mind. We only have symbolism. But I would point out that just that little detail on Juno about her in her natal chart lets me know that, past life relationship is coming forward for her to kind of look at. There may be a moment that she has to let them go. She has to let them live their own experience to figure something out. I think that is the case in a lot of ways here in the scenario. But in the moment that the premiere in London is happening, the moon is applying with the midheaven. See the midheaven? That's the MC right there. That midheaven with the moon on the midheaven tells the premiere has that baked in, that combination that Juno's important, kind of a critical thing being reviewed here, which is definitely, we've seen it in the fans, but this is also her own emotional kind of looking at it, right? Like that's coming, right? It's sitting in the house of this other person's values, but it's also activated with the vertex. Look at that. That vertex is like a faded connection. That's a super powerful point. And we have the moon right on it, midheaven right on it. It's really being activated in her chart. So it kind of pulls out partner and their values and their vulnerability. So really it's kind of pinpointing Luke's vulnerability. Okay. And then many people critique that based on all of the things that have transpired. That Juno include there is just kind of like it's bringing forward that past life connection piece again to me. It's like another, when I read words by Demetra George on Juno in the 12th house for Nicola. And Mercury is so interesting because it's so close, and Mercury is responsible for the rulership of Virgo. It's kind of it's touching on so many important threads that I think are important. Now, and Mercury also is responsible for the rulership of Gemini. And here we have Mercury in Gemini on the transiting moment. So Mercury is extra powerful. Okay. It's going to bring forward, it's going to manifest the thing. Okay. And it will kind of be precise about it, because of it being in its own domain. So that helps us learn something, right? About the power of different aspects of the natal chart, but also the moment something is just about to break open. Yes, definitely the premiere. Millions of people are going to be observing her work and her creativity. There is going to be this duality of them, how they pick up, the perception of her work. She'll probably look at it from also her having moved through it and worked it. And did the work, but we saw that they were actually watching themselves in some scenes, right? So in terms of I don't know if that was promo tour, maybe that was part of the promo tour. After the fact, they were observing themselves doing certain scenes and what they were getting out of it. So I actually think that's quite important for them both to do that. But for her, it's kind of like looking at the duality of it, looking at the duality of the character, but also looking at the duality of her own self in that kind of context. And then that's working out some things in that she will work out privately in her own stoic. That's a Mercury in Capricorn in her unconscious mind. There's something within her own mind that's kind of buried there, bringing out parts of her, what she thinks of status, what she thinks of, just the stoic, how she might look at relationships, like how people make choices and things like that. She may have some judgments on some things, but because she has the Aquarian rising, she's going to be looking at things from a little bit different point of view in this life. Okay. She is got all that Capricorn energy, but it's moving in a direction in this life as a soul to explore things in an Aquarian way, things that are a bit breaking the rules. Well, it might feel naughty, but it's good for her soul to do that because she has to look at things in a new light, not how it used to, kind of look at like Regency that's not Bridgerton. Think of how stiff the rules may have been in actual Regency era, right? So I know she's done another film, a series called Harlots or something. She was one of the characters in Harlots. And so think of the reality that it was brought forward in that particular show. It forces us to kind of look back into the, different periods of time and assess kind of what was the situation for women. I mean, really interesting. And then the Lady Whistledown character she gets to play. Penelope, Lady Whistledown, what a combination. And the duality of that, like having to bring those two parts of self together, just phenomenal. And so that whole storyline and how that emerges in part 2, right? So that's all on deck. The ascendant of the moment that the London premiere has Scorpio at the top of her chart. It's kind of highlighting this is a career moment, and it has the Scorpio. It has that in that moment. So it's really highlighting the opposition of the moment bit of the career and home. And we got some insights of right before that when she was in Galway, going home, catching up with her mother, introducing Luke to her mother. I mean, this is just so interesting because this is the part that is so close to her. This is where she doesn't want to show all the time to the world. She kind of protects that. But this was a moment to bring out that part of herself a little bit. She's not going to show the whole thing. That's a super private Taurus moon, but is sharing a little bit of it with the world. But Scorpio is kind of the sex, the sexuality, the deep bonds, the jealousy in part 2 that shows up, these themes. Okay. Envy, I think surfaces also envy. So a little bit, all these different kinds of emotions, that people have to sift through in their relationship. So this is a part of what's emerging in the part 2, just the premiere. This is going to be talked about, right? People who were actually at the premiere get to see, I think, episode 5. I don't think they showed the whole thing except just that episode, right? Which is really saucy. That's the sauciest one of them all for Nicola and her vulnerability in the moment, and Luke also very vulnerable in that. So that's Scorpio, not surprising at the top of her chart for the premiere in London. Okay, let's see here. Oh, also, I just noticed that the ascendant was also hitting on Pallas Athena, and I did a little bit on Pallas Athena in another video as it pertains to Luke, because Luke had the Pallas Athena in his natal receiving Psyche in a transiting moment. So we'll look at that later. But here it is again, where the ascendant is highlighting Pallas Athena. And Pallas Athena, I was reviewing that as well, because I don't spend as much time like deep diving into the asteroids on every single chart that I do. So I kind of wanted to refresh myself on Pallas and kind of the meaning behind it. Another meaning besides being the strategist or being the wisdom, the feminine wisdom, another one was the creative intelligence that's put into something. So wow, in terms of it being Scorpio and the sexuality, that's so how it's displayed in part 2, especially episode 5, that some people got to see at the premiere, would be around her creative intelligence of being on screen as a 37-year-old woman looking like she's 20, barely 20, and showing and being able to portray the innocence and that transition that she goes through to being more worldly woman and acknowledging more parts of herself and her own sexuality. Scorpio. Wow. I think that's pretty stunning, right? Another thing that I want to point out is, we covered this part of the stellium of Gemini, so important, the duality. But also we have at the bottom, that's transiting at the bottom of her chart, it is in the 7th of the moment. So if you have the ascendant, opposite the ascendant is the 7th. So this is at the bottom of her chart. At the bottom of her chart, you have Mars in Taurus with Cupido. Cupido to me is more lustful, like in its translation of the energy of kind of that passion. So there's passion that has equals lust versus passion that is more imbued with romance, like amore. And Venus is kind of more how we actually share our love, but it's also what we attract in our love, like how we attract and how we build rapport with people, it's very feminine. The feminine is the magnetism. It's very important. Magnetism is the feminine. And so it's important to kind of consider that Mars is in Venus's sign down here. Mars is in Venus's house. If Venus had a house, this is her house. And Venus in the Taurus is the very natural beauty, like the goddess beauty. Okay. And how that is, it's like almost like the bee that goes to the flower, and Mars would be the bee, the flower is the feminine, and so it's participating, but the flower is the foundation of the beauty. Okay, so it's interesting that we have Mars and Cupido conjunct each other in her 4th house, and so there's a little bit of how there is the perception of the lust nature in the mix with the male. Okay, so that's part of the premiere because it's about the female gaze. That's a Bridgerton thing, female gaze. And Luke is that center of attention. So he's the bee that everybody's looking at. And she's the flower, right? So I think that's kind of interesting. It's kind of pinpointing. But in this moment, we also have this energy here at her ascendant. That is Pluto and the lot of fortune in the moment that the premiere began, sitting at the beginning of, like I said, I think her ascendant's probably in the first couple of degrees of Aquarius. It could be deeper into that sign, but I truly think it's in that first couple of degrees. But that is activating not only that part of her chart, it's activating by transit. Just these are in transit and this is in transit. So this is like just an interesting combination to me in terms of there's some major transformation that she's going to be picking up on and what she thinks of or in terms of the definition of her own identity. This is like a transforming moment, like that picks up on something that just starts a transformation of some sort that is going on with how she is in friendships, what she may do slightly different than before because of the definition of friendship, like close friends plus love. Yeah, we love our friends, but there are these interesting gates that we put up of boundaries for that's my friend and I'll do XYZ with my friend. But this was very fluid with these two in the public eye. They were doing a job, but at the same time, it exploded things that go beyond, right? And so I think she's going to have a new awareness around kind of how things can be defined and then how that can shape her own identity and experience in something and how explosive it can be. Yeah, because it sets up a frame, right? And so much is perception. So much of this is all perception. So I think that covers a lot for Nicola's kind of chart with the London premiere. This is the red carpet. This is before the viewing, right? This is good. It's in the process to go through the premiere. Very, very important. Okay. So that's Nicola and how that moment was activated as well. Next part is Luke. So there are so many things on Luke's chart. So we're going to look at similar things and points. Okay. So this is the red carpet premiere. So people haven't seen the part 2 yet. That's important. Timing. What's in it for Luke? This is the first thing I want to point out right here. This part of his chart is activated in a big way because Jupiter. So Luke is 31. So from an annual perfection point of view, which I always like, what year is it in their life? He's 31 years old. That means he's in an 8th house annual perfection. So he's dealing with his 8th house, which is partner, the committed relationship partner, and their values. Those are evolutionary terms, okay? Traditional astrology does not look at 8th house as values. The 8th house is very much a blind spot for the individual. Okay, but it does bring up values in a big way. Other people's money, death. It brings up taboo subjects like sexuality. But to me, it's also in evolutionary. It's like, to me, this is a very vulnerable place, sexuality. Okay, this having Jupiter's very important for him too. Age 31. So to me, it's like, oh, both of them have Pisces as the sign for their annual perfection. And that to me is like the flooding of the consciousness, the flooding of feelings, the high imagination, maybe a bit of too much substance at some point can like challenge things. Okay. But with Saturn in Pisces and Neptune in Pisces, there is a massive illusion going on and a massive blurring of lines that we would otherwise recognize. Oh, that's the boundary in that relationship, where those boundaries have been considerably blurred, right? So not only is she having it, but he is having it too. And both have the importance of where is Jupiter in their chart? What's coming forward with Jupiter's transits for them? What is Jupiter activating? So when I kind of like pinpointed, oh, they're both having Pisces as this place of manifestation, but they're also Jupiter. So Nicola has Jupiter in Pisces. So she has a profound, strong, in its own domain, Jupiter, super powerful. So it bears that for her. But for Luke, the Jupiter in his chart is in the 3rd house of perception, in the 3rd house of siblings. There's something that also has been going down this year with him and his his sister. That Jupiter's in there, and even parts of his family, right? Because that to me is like extended family parts. Jupiter is responsible for his 8th house of sexuality, taxes, these kinds of things, but it's other people's values too, other people's money. And also Sagittarius down here, his North Node ruler. So Jupiter is super, super important for him in his own arc of his life, like what he's trying to move towards and evolve. Okay, traditional astrology really doesn't focus on the nodes of the moon. They just look at it as powerful points, but evolutionary astrology looks at it from the evolutionary arc of life for an individual. So this is an evolutionary karmic moment for Luke, okay? Even more than Nicola. Okay, so what does this moment bring forward for him? So it is the premiere event. Things are about in a few hours going to unfold that sparks even more chatter, discussion, points of perception about the series, about him as an actor, about his career, all these things. And it focuses on partners. So let me talk about partners for just a second. So if indeed he has made a commitment to this person and they're in a full-blown relationship, I don't know here or there. This is just a perspective that, for her even to be there has got to be some level of relationship that has matured for him to even invite to the party or to be there in some frame. To me, it's also his relationship with Nicola, because she's a committed partner co-lead in his business of acting. Okay. It's also others are his contractual agreements to do the work that he does, because Saturn's in his 7th house. And so to me, there's like multiple levels of committed partner speaking out from his 7th house, but it's important because he's learning about what it means to be to mature into his own awareness of the Saturn, his Saturn. He's come past his Saturn return, but he's fresh off of his Saturn return, right? And he's learning about other people's, how they are with their integrity. Saturn integrity, kind of, that's an important combination there. Saturn in Aquarius is breaking the rules, a bit of doing it in a way that's different. But of course, this is the partner kind of picking up that energy and reflecting it back to him. And I think the more he maybe looks at astrology, if he does, he will recognize that how important it is for him of who he chooses to have in that space in his life. I think Jade was an interesting partner for him because of the grounding it gave him as well, to a certain point, because they only lasted 4 years. And there's something I've heard rumor, I don't know the truth of the matter, but it could be there was a betrayal in that relationship because it was kind of ending on Saturn, part of the Saturn return, the end of the Saturn return, right before, because Saturn went into Pisces in March of 2023. And if that's around where they were breaking up, that's part of that kind of ending that note. It's kind of like, I think that relationship is still super valuable because it gives him a point of perspective of what he likes to have in his life about a partner and elements of a partner that were a good frame for him in a lot of ways. They both had passions around singing and travel, a supportive partner, these kind of things. Right. So the new partner is considerably younger. And I think this is a relationship of sorts that is bringing in a past life scenario of the immaturity part, but also bringing forward duality. Okay. She is bringing forward that moment in a few hours, brings forward, I think, a past life perspective on something that in his unconscious mind is, figuring out. And that's a karmic wave breaking, a moment that's breaking open so he can get into it. He's living the moment, right? And all the disruption that it caused. So it kind of has all that Gemini energy. So it's the dual nature, the duality, and that's activating. The Venus is being activated. The sun is right on that within just a couple of degrees of that south node. And so to me, decisions just days before would have been probably right on that because the sun is at 22, but Mercury, boom, is just 1 degree off. So that Mercury partner, younger partner, is more than likely the responsible one for how that went down, like why that even went down. But it's something that on the soul level, the soul contract is this is going to take shape. So it activates something for his experience. It's unconscious behavior coming forward. Okay. So it's not only the portion of his experience with something. So this can, to me, is pointing out this square that's still sitting in the, part of his experience. And it's kind of a moment that brings everything forward to see, that square is going to get highlighted simply because of the activation of the Mercury to the south node. Okay. So it goes, okay, who is that Mercury person? Here it is. Younger person. Here it is. Gemini and Mercury. Okay. It's tell me. And I don't know if anybody knows, but I believe from her chart, I've pulled up, we don't have I've just put Greece like Athens, but she's probably born in another city, but it's such a small island. It's not going to shift that much about where the Jupiter is in her chart. The Jupiter in her chart and Antonio's chart is Jupiter at 1 degree of Gemini, I do believe. Hello, she's in a Jupiter return. So she wants the visibility, but she's also expanding duality, part of her makeup, part of her choices. So there you go. What else for Luke? So Luke also has at the premiere moment, the square. This square is so huge on the transit. This is the transiting moment of the premiere. So the lot of fortune, Aquarius, Pluto, Aquarius, that Pluto is going to come back over that point. So I kind of think snapshots in time have effects later on, like a ripple of the energy. So to me, that lot of fortune gets reactivated when Pluto comes back over it in early September. So when, wasn't it that they were going to start filming season 4 in like June, July, but then it got pushed to September? Well, that Pluto's coming over that lot of fortune point of that premiere. There's something else that's going to ripple through there. Okay. The Mars is square. Cupido is square. So the lust scenario about body image, the presentation of the body. Now, this is Luke's chart, but we have I think a huge thing that is emerged from all of this is the comparisons of body of feminine, which is dark. This is the shadow of the feminine, and we're all like swimming in it, trying to like navigate it. But it's not just in the show. This is like in the world. Like in the world, we have this huge moment of the feminine showing us themes of dark feminine shadow material that we have as a collective to navigate and heal. Okay, it has a purpose. So we have to bring our light to it, to forgive, not just forgive, but to acknowledge where it is, acknowledge how it got there, acknowledge, and it's a journey to heal it. And every individual soul has something to like bear into that, right? Because of where those parts of the self are in their own shape. You can see it through your own astrology, natal chart, but also transiting moments will activate things and like, oh, that's getting activated in me. That's why I'm even looking at this thing. Maybe that's why I'm feeling that thing. So the themes of jealousy and envy in the show, that's very interesting because those emotions sit up on top of, fear. And so the deeper we understand different parts of ourselves and the negative emotions, the more we can acknowledge exactly what we are feeling, right? Some people have the feelings and it takes time for them to even register that is what they are feeling, right? There's so much value in understanding emotions. So, and then how that influences how we behave one way or another, positive or negatively, both are always in constant movement. So, but what gets more, right? So things get activated at certain transiting and certain connections with people. Okay. So we have transformation of this fated moment. There's going to be a transformation going on here. Okay. And that's all opposite. So there's a transformation for the partner. Remember, there's multiple partners for Luke here. I want to point out that there is a partner of a real life, maybe in real life potential relationship. I'm just going to call it that because of the visibility and certain things and events. What kind of relationship? I'm not going to try to describe that. I'm just going to say it's significant. It's significant to show up on the world stage like this. It's significant enough to get so much energy on it. And then Nicola as a co-star, Nicola as been called best friend. Okay. And I have noted that it's 7th house and potentially even 3rd house kind of combination as for Nicola. Now, even the in real life Antonia situation could also have a bit of 3rd house because of being introduced to family members. If I am correct in that research, we get these little pieces of information. So what's true? That could be the case. Don't know if that has been altered since these events. That could have been case earlier on, but I think there could be some adjustments here. Now, I think it's important to kind of keep in this is the timing of the premiere. And I have another slide and charts for the actual moment that the pictures broke, okay? And changed up a lot of perception. So another thing about Jupiter in Gemini, it squares the midheaven of the premiere and the moon in Virgo. So that Jupiter squares. So this comes into his own sense of self-worth, his own values, money, potentials, and these things in that moment. So that to me is an interesting, not that there won't be opportunity to earn more money and all that. That's yes, absolutely. He's going to have that. And we're seeing that he has different things he's been invited to, but it's different kind of stuff, different kind of work. All we know is his contractual for season 4. I don't know if anyone has seen any other potential projects that he has gotten since that premiere moment, but maybe he's waiting to get the schedule to understand. Okay. So this is important also that the past life scenario being brought forward in this moment and how that also is an opposition. I think it's important to point out the opposition because all of that energy is opposing his creative self. It's opposite. It's creating the highest tension to the character that he has worked so hard to create. And so it has this kind of real high tension and a high tension that will require him to navigate. Will it break something? It could. It does have that with people and the illusion he created with his character. It pulled people away from it, right? So there's the duality that actually pulls people and lessens their interest. And yet, this is what's fascinating to me. Even that happened. Even people said it. The streams say that there's more going on here because the streams show that there is enough interest to continue having a trajectory to keep streaming, and it broke into the top 10 of all time streamed series. So what a combination, right? And yet at the same time, he's had to do some things, I think, to manage that image post the premiere. Now, I don't know when he got signed up for for Jimmy Fallon. The show that him going to do Jimmy Fallon on June 19th, which was roughly a week after this, that was probably already in the works. But I wonder if certain parts of the monologue or the dialogue that he was going to be doing on the Jimmy Fallon weren't set up to help part of his image and his connection with his co-star, Nicola. So I'll go into that later, but I think there's something about that moment that it's funny. It kind of shows him on his own having an interview. Yes, he was probably nervous, but it was an easy conversation about something in his local community, very in the barber and the haircut, something about his beauty. I love it. And then how he had a conversation, an easier conversation, because it was something like that, right? And then the little skit he did with reading the phrases and in the Bridgerton, sexy tone or whatever. But then also how he couldn't help himself talking about his co-star Nicola being in Barbie and that he could be the Ken. That one slipped out, I think. So, however, I think it's interesting is that slipped out. Yeah, it's kind of the perfect thing that would help kind of a bit on his image in that moment. So that kind of makes me like, how much was that added in for that purpose, right? So there's kind of this, the illusion is so strong, and with the Neptune in Pisces and Saturn in Pisces, the boundaries get blurred about that. And so the truth of the matter gets blurred because we have that Saturn square. The Saturn square, the nodes of his chart is a part of that mix, right? And also opposite Juno, which then you can loosely then tie into the moon and that kind of, because that's a bit about 8 degrees away. So I think it's more that we have like a stronger T square going on with the Saturn in Luke's chart at the premiere. And so all of those components, and then just the how synchronistic in the timing that Psyche is also on his Saturn. And Saturn is, to me, timing. I get repeats of the timing. There's something about the illusion, the importance of the illusion, but it's also bringing attention to the vulnerability of the self when it's in relation to someone else. So you have the vulnerability of him in his relationship with Nicola, and what got frayed on the end, what was sensitized by this moment between them two, right? Like that was going to be a surprise. It was a surprise, I think, for him and for Nicola, but that definitely gets into the sensitivity and how he might communicate with Nicola going forward, right? Like I needed to kind of give you heads up of things or whatnot. It seemed in all of the promo tour that he and Nicola and Luke communicate often and a lot. And so to me, this was a kind of a glitch that he couldn't anticipate, but it's definitely in the mix of divine timing for him to bring something forward. And Nicola's participating, at the soul level for her own awareness around the Chiron of her chart and the duality that she has in her creative self and the duality that she has in relation to her house of pleasure. She's learning about her own pleasure. Not to get too personal, but it's important for us to understand the pleasure principle for ourselves and what we like with a lover, or why do we think this way or that way, or what has conditioned us to think some way or another way around a woman's right to pleasure. And so much of Penelope is about her receiving pleasure, so then she becomes more embodied, and then she's stronger in her bringing together the union of the parts of herself that are Lady Whistledown and Penelope. That's just a character, but it's the principle of it all, right? That whole show is giving that. It's also in other characters, but definitely in her character arc. That's in her character arc in Bridgerton. Luke's is understanding the parts of the self where he's jealous, where he's envy. Okay, that's in his actual natal chart. And here comes this other player in real life, brought through a friend group, past life. That's the friend group bringing that person in. To me, is bringing to the surface, bringing into the moment now for, oh, you're ready to work on this thing. You're ready to evolve this thing and move towards a bigger truth for yourself, not pleasing both people and trying to play both sides. That's duality, right? Like you're making a decision. You're moving away from trying to please and not having the whole truth, right? So that's really, really good. There was something else I wanted to point out, and this is about the South Node that I wanted to bring up because I think it's so important. And when I was rereading this, I always go back to my books. I love my books. And I want to point this out because it kind of pinpoints Luke's South Node. Okay, so I'm going to read a little section here. So Gemini South Node. The key word here is promise. For lifetimes, this individual has enmeshed himself in dualities, resulting in indecision. He has tried to be all things to all people, and as a result has made himself attuned to superficiality. Now he has a strong karmic lesson to learn in areas of loyalty and allegiance. Eventually, he will come to see that by playing both sides against the middle, he can only hope to make himself the center of the sandwich, caught in the squeeze. He's caught in the squeeze, right? Goodness. Nevertheless, he retains a past life fear of committing himself fully to either side, for at least on the superficial level. He sees truth and right in both. He still believes that a definite commitment to one side would leave him with the feeling of missing the opportunity inherent in the other. Oh gosh, so good. This ability to remain uncommitted enables him constantly to adjust himself to fit the needs of the moment. Like the chameleon, his colors change with his surroundings. In past incarnations, he was not too discriminating, knowing that it really didn't matter where he gave his affiliations, since he never gave his complete self anyway. Now he swings like a pendulum in the breeze, open to ride, if but for a brief time only, on the winning wind. He purposely makes himself the pawn of others, and, even if only for the moment, seems to agree with them so that he can temporarily feel accepted and a part of something. Let me see, there's a lot here, but I read that and I was like, oh my goodness. It makes me think about his friend group, the multiple friends, and what they bring in him as a part of his past life, what needs to be looked at this life for him to evolve something in how he feels like he fits in or not fits in. And he's definitely on an interesting journey to have a breakthrough. And this is like that moment. This is like a divine timing moment to open that up, crack that nut open. What else is important here that I really loved? So for this individual, life's biggest task involves a quest for higher knowledge. The fact that he got introduced to astrology on the tour, and even a part of the Doom interview when they were doing Colin, put that thing of them going over Colin and Penelope's astrology is just like, oh, here, we're opening the door for you to look at this and maybe get interested in it. Why does that sound like it's right on the character, right? So then maybe he explores it for himself, which they definitely were looking at their charts in Australia. We know that. And then maybe they were continuing the conversation in Brazil, but definitely in Australia for sure, because Nicola mentioned that in an interview. So I find that fascinating. So he's on the quest for higher knowledge. That's Sagittarius. That's his North Node. And he's getting that through his creative, right? So it's introduced when he's, as part of his creative. And then also through the Sagittarius North Node, he must learn that in order for a man to be capable of seeing the truth, he must first be the truth. And so he'll go far if he teaches himself to speak from his higher mind, for the esoteric meaning of all that he says will ultimately show him his real identity. That to me speaks to his connection with Nicola, because of their, more than likely, I'm 85% sure on this, that his ascendant being Leo is opposite her ascendant in Aquarius, and that mirror, so he has that strong mirror with other. And so that whole sense of identity, he's going to go through such a path of navigation to, mesh his transcendental part of him, thought, and reach a spiritual union within himself. So even in the show, Colin goes on the journey through the travel. So a big portion of the mysteries and going on travel is to get to know yourself in different foreign lands, and how you are and how you frame things and how you learn that way. But you have to work through the karma first and understand yourself from that, and you turn away from the past life residue and the pretended part of that identity that was created. So you're reaching for that, what is real. So in this carnation, as Luke Newton, he's reaching for what is more real, what's more natural. And ultimately he will come to see that although there are two sides of a coin, that's a Gemini perspective, looking at this side and that side, this or that, and that comparison of things, it's still just one coin, and the one coin concept is Sagittarius. Okay, when he develops this perspective of vision, so get some vision, bro, he will be able to transform the knowledge he has acquired into divine wisdom. That's the divine wisdom. That's the Pallas Athena. Okay, so that's why I've been tracking on that that Pallas Athena. He's getting that perspective from others. So he's sifting through that too. But when Pallas Athena is in a moment, and here it is on the ascendant of the premiere, the red carpet premiere in London, it is so right next to that ascendant, saying, ooh, goodness, part of the juice here. So that is so important. So his alliance and allegiance to his friends is a past life scenario that has to kind of get worked out, because it's got some difficult things in terms of how he has framed himself and his identity in connection to that. Okay, that's very important. So his evolution of the past life through him being Luke Newton will free him from the bondage of indecision, and it will, in its place, give him glimpses of universal truth. Wow, right? Good stuff. I love it. This is why I love astrology, is how much it gives us about, when we're born, we're not born with an empty slate. We come in, we take our first breath, and we get the image of the heavens imprinted on our consciousness. And that's what's materializing. So when we're a baby, things are really, really powerful in their first 3 years of life. And that's the importance of like progressions, okay? And just how things will spiral through time. But there is kind of the perspective that a soul is kind of looking at a point in time to be born. To me, that's the intelligence of it, and that it has a purpose for what is going to emerge from that through its intelligence and working with the past life wave through the unconscious mind that has now, have moments where it's going to materialize. So when I say divine timing, this is what I'm talking about. Certain things have divine timing, certain things, almost everything has divine timing. But the concept of duality is very much a part of being in the body. The duality of our point of perspective of being in a body and our relationship to the heavens. While on Earth we have hot and cold, short and tall, etc. Right? There's duality, light and dark, all of these things. Duality is a very important part of our experience of being in the physical. Okay, yeah, because when you're not in a body, you're kind of at one. You're kind of in the Pisces, like beyond Pisces. It's like everything. It is the ocean of the conscious. So Pisces has the feeling, the illusion, these parts of the themes that we pick up on, and it's also kind of what we tap into when we're tapping into intuition. We get the feeling of something. So we either get it in our body, we maybe get it in our mind, we might get an image. That's very Pisces as well. Yeah, so different things that kind of give us our psychic awareness, but it's also kind of what jacks up our intuition in anything